I'm actually going to watch the YouTube chat with my other computer. Okay.
All right.
Okay, here we go. So we're mute that. We are live. Hey guys, people on YouTube, how's it going? Can you hear us? I'm going to hide that. Okay. Second here. Technical difficulties. Sometimes it's not. Okay, Eric, are you still with us? You look a little frozen.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Okay, I can see. Okay, great. I can see tons of people here in the YouTube chat. That's awesome. So I'm just going to get this going into my other computer so I can watch the chat. There we go. How's everybody doing? Okay, perfect. Okay, so what we're gonna do here, everybody, is Diego and I. We got myself, Diego Fooder, and we got Erich Schultz, a special guest here, and we are gonna talk to you guys about what's happening with PaperPot Co. a little bit, which won't take too long, just some updates, and then we're going to have Erich talk about some of the awesome stuff he's done on his farm this year that's been a game changer. Diego and I were down there, I think it was in November, checking out the new location, and it's rocking. It's really exciting. And we thought we would share it with you guys because anybody who's market gardening out there, I think will definitely find this stuff interesting. So what I'm going to do right now is just share my screen, and I'm going to do this, move us over there. Can you guys all see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see the slides?
Yep.
There we go. Cool. So, some basic news on PaperPot Co. We've got some exciting developments happening right now. And Diego, feel free to just chime in whenever. We have developed a new flat for bottom watering. This is something that kind of came out of just requests from a lot of people. And we decided to just move forward ahead with it. And so what you'll be able to do with this product is it's basically just sits on the underside of your 1122 PaperPot flat, and now you can bottom water it. You know, guys like Ben Hartman who have been using the PaperPot for a long time, they were often using like cookie sheets for your oven and doing that to soak their flat prior to planting. But you know, the cookie sheets take up a lot of space. They're not perfectly fitted for the flat, and so we had a lot of people asking us about this, so we went ahead and did it.
Yeah, it's been a big request to have those over time here, and we now have them. They are super rigid. They're super durable. In fact, I'll just show you, like, this is a sample. Like, these things, they don't want to break. So I'm pretty confident that anybody that buys these, you're buying this more or less for life, because unless it melts or you burn it up, it's not going to ever break. We spent a lot of time working with some engineers that designed plastic to come up with this tray. And I think it's going to solve a big problem out there for a lot of people doing microgreens and a lot of people that want to grow crops and bottom water their crops, their seedlings. So stay tuned for these. They should be listed on the site. I'm hoping in February. They're in pre-production now. So February timeframe, I'm hoping to get them up on the site, but watch for those. I think it's going to be a big game changer, and it's going to make a lot of people happy, because this is probably the most emailed thing I get asked about all the time are, do you have solid trays that go under the paper pot flats? The answer was no, but the answer is now yes.
And Diego sent me some photos of driving over these things with his car, and so the plastic is unbelievably resilient. So yeah, it's an exciting, it's certainly an exciting product. So that's bottom watering flats. We've got some other stuff happening too. Just a little update. We're going to talk about the organic paper chains for paper pot in a minute, because this is a question that we get so often. But I just want to quickly address the Jang JP5. We've sold so many of these things that we're back ordered. But right now it's looking like 2 weeks we'll be back in action with the JP5, which should be just enough time for the majority of us in North America to get back into our season with. So I'm hoping that isn't a delay for anybody else there. You want to add anything to that, Diego?
No, yeah, about 2 weeks on the JP5, getting them back. They've just been really popular. There's just none left at all in the country right now. So we're waiting for more to come over from Korea. But I think this is, as you'll see when Erich talks about it, this is a game-changing tool for people direct seeding. We'll have more of them. And we put together this kit with all the rollers that you're going to need on your farm. You can see the rollers in the picture there. So right out of the box, you can get up and at them. These are the same rollers Erich uses. These are the same rollers Curtis uses. But pretty confident that you shouldn't need to get anything else once you get this.
That's right. It's totally this tool is totally reinventing the way that people do high density planting. And when Erich talks about it more, you guys will see it is just the fact that you don't have to have perfect bed prep to do high density multi-row seeding like this is a significant game changer for people who are doing a lot of beds. And this isn't a tool for everybody. A farm like mine, a 1/4 acre, this tool isn't totally necessary. This is more for somebody who's at least at Erich Schultz's steadfast farm size, an acre plus. You're doing, many beds of greens a week. This is for that. So this isn't for everybody. It's for those kind of farms. So that's important to understand, because, we don't want to sell people things that aren't necessary. We're not just looking to get, turn and burn a quick buck. We want people to use these tools for the right purposes, and we want them to be happy, and we want it to make a significant difference on the farm. So the one thing that we get asked about the most, and this is a burning question for a ton of people out there who are certified organic, is can you use paper pot plugs in organic farms? And so Diego, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, sorry, I was went to grab the chain. So one of the potential solutions to the organic issue that is coming from the Japanese side, these are made by one company in Japan, and they're starting to make paper chains out of hemp. So this isn't craft paper pulp like the normal paper pots would be made out of. This is made out of hemp. So they're trying to innovate different solutions depending on which way the NOP goes here in the US. Now for 2019, paper pots are permissible under organic standards, while the NOP evaluates and digs into what they're going to do. Eventually they have to make some sort of final ruling, and they're either going to say the current product is fine and acceptable as is, or it is not for organic farms. If they say it's not, well, that's where, again, the Japanese come in, trying different materials like hemp to make the NOP happy with what they're doing, trying different glues. A lot of people think that these weren't permissible because of the glue in them, but the specific reason and ruling that the NOP pointed to when they said these are not allowed in organic was the fact that they were made out of virgin paper, meaning new paper, and the specific NOP ruling says you could only use cardboard, newspaper or recycled paper in organic farming as a compost feedstock. So the fact that this was new paper, it kind of threw it out. A real weird gray area technicality there. So for now, 2019, these are a go. You're okay. Beyond 2019, a lot of people are working towards a solution, both on the policy side of things and the product side of things. So stay tuned for more to come. I think long-term, there will be a permanent solution to the organic problem when it comes to paper chains. But for now, it's kind of just a play and try stuff and wait game with the NOP until they come out and make a final ruling.
Yeah, it's funny with that whole thing, you know, like a lot of people assumed, and I guess it's a reasonable assumption that the reason that the paper chains couldn't be used with organic was that there was something toxic in the glue, and that is just not the case. It was like Diego said, it just came down to the fact that the paper wasn't recycled, that it was new paper. So it's kind of funny, but it's optimistic either way. You know, just in sort of conclusion, you can use them this year, and whatever happens, whether the NOP says yeah we can use it or no, if they say yes, then you're golden. And if they say no, then the Japanese are ready to convert to something to their liking. So we're all good to go there. I think what we'll do right now is open it up to some questions. So I'm just going to stop this presentation for a second and stop the sharing screen, get us all back up on here, and look at some Q. We'll do a few questions regarding paper pot stuff. And then what we'll do after is we're going to do Erich. He's going to talk about kind of 5 big game-changing things for him on the farm this year. I've got some slides to accompany what he's talking about. And then we'll take more general questions. But right now, if there's anybody in here that has some questions regarding what we just kind of talked about specifically, Diego and I can address those. And if not, we'll just run right into this presentation. So I'll just give you guys a few seconds or maybe up to a minute to see if we have anything populated in there.
Yeah, there was one I saw that came up earlier there, and it was, are we going to carry non-chain paper pots? And what did that person mean by non-chain paper pots? Well, you know, the common stuff that we sell, or what we sell now on the site, they're all in a chain. These are pots linked in a chain all together. Well, there's also non-chain paper pots that are individual pots that you can pull apart. These are not linked in a chain. They're hand transplanted. They're not transplanted via a paper pot transplanter. Will we carry these? I don't know. I'm kind of curious to the audience here. Like, would you want something like this? I like to think of this as a wrapped soil block. So,
yeah, I've tried them. It's a neat product. It certainly can save you some time. But yeah, I'm curious too what people think.
Is it better than a cell tray? I don't know. You know, the fact that you're going to pay probably $2 for one of these that might have 128 cells in it, is that worth it? Maybe in some contexts. In others, maybe not. But I think if you have a good cell tray, a Winstrip tray, or something else that you really like and you want to go with, that's the solution. But, you know, shoot me an email, hello@paperpot.co, if you're interested in finding out more about the non-chain paper pots.
So another question here that we get a lot, which would just be good to address in this video so it's out there. Can paper chains be used in small-scale backyard gardens without the machine? They absolutely can. And I've done it in my front yard garden, and it's so easy. You just do it with your hand. You can do it in a variety of different ways. You can, like the way I do it in my front yard garden is I make a trench with my hand. I unravel about 5 or 4 feet of paper chain, put it in there, and then just close it up with my hand like that. It's really simple. You can use a simple gardener's hoe. You can use a rake. Neversink Tools has that zipper tool. You know, you absolutely can. And it's kind of cool because you could essentially start using a paper pot system as a gardener, and I'm doing it because I'm not farming this year. I'm taking a break from farming. So I'm doing paper pots in my garden. We're starting stuff this week. Drop cedar, flat, and paper chains. And we're going to be planting Salanova and other kinds of plugs in the garden by hand. So it can be done. And, you know, somebody could start on a garden scale with only getting 2 things. You could just get a pack of flats and then a small amount of chains. And that's it. You could hand seed your flats because, you know, you're not doing hundreds of flats, so you don't necessarily need to have a drop seeder. And there you go. You could be doing it as a gardener. Looking here at some of the other questions.
Yeah, and one I see is somebody was asking, how do these non-chain paper pots pull apart? Pretty simple. I mean, this one is 128 in a sheet, and when you wet it, the glue holding each of these 128 cubes together softens up. So when you go to transplant, you just simply pull it apart, almost like you're pulling a piece off a sheet of brownies or something like it, or a piece of pizza that's been cut up in a whole bunch of pieces. It's sticking together, but very light. So you just pull it off and they come off, and then they're in your hand. Plant them by hand. Plant half the sheet at one time, all the sheet at one time. It doesn't matter, but they all pull apart individually. They're not connected in any way.
That's right. Somebody here saying sell short 1020s. We do. We sell 1-inch deep 1020s at Paper Pot Co. They're on there. Somebody was asking here, Christina was asking, or no, Christian was asking, how much water do the bottom water trays hold with a 1020 tray? If you're talking about the 1020 bottom watering flats that are meant for 1020s, I guess you could calculate that volume by just going 10 times 20 by 1. That would give you a rough amount of volume. Yeah, and so with ours, they go to the edge of the tray. They fill up the tray. So it's the same. It's the same idea with the. Well, no, they actually do a little bit less, don't they? They actually do. What is it, Diego? Like, do you have one with you there?
Yeah. So if you look at the bottom trays for the paper pot, if somebody was asking the dimensions, these are 25 left to right, 13 inches width, and they're probably about 5/8 inch high. And we did a bunch of math and trials because if you made this so deep that it went up to the top of the paper pot tray, you couldn't get the paper pot tray out of the flat without using like a screwdriver to pry it open. So I think this is the optimum kind of depth for handling and need. And really, if you're watering fairly frequently in your greenhouse, this is as much water as you'd need to put in. Like a chain of paper pots filled with soil, like they just can't take up much more water than this volume wise. When are they going to be available? February, I'm hoping. What's the price going to be? Probably about what the cost is of our flats on the site now. I'm still kind of working on final costs with the company who's producing these, but there's a chance they might be a little bit cheaper. I don't think they'll be more than the current paper pot flats, but you're probably looking somewhere in the $79, $89 range for 10. But I think, again, it's something that you buy it, you're never going to have to buy it again unless you really attempt to destroy it.
Somebody asking about, how about the irrigation system we saw at Ray's? Oh, that must have been somebody who was at the workshop. Yeah, I don't know, but if there's really much to say about that at this point.
Maybe in the future. Right now, it's kind of up in the air. We don't know.
Yeah. Hey, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get started with Erich's presentation, and everybody watching here. There's like this. I can't see where how many people we have in here, but there's. Oh, here we go. Participants. There's quite a number of you. Hit the like button. It helps the analytics so more people see this video. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button. Okay, so I am going to share our screen again, and then I'm going to pass it over to Erich. So I'll just introduce Erich, you guys. Erich Schultz, awesome market gardener, owner, operator of Steadfast Farm in Mesa, Arizona. You've seen probably many videos I've done with him in the past. And Erich has been a kind of close collaborator with us at Paper Pot Co. He's amongst a sort of select few of market growers that are sort of our team of what we call pro growers. They're people that work with us, help us R&D tools, and just farmers that we stay in touch with constantly, so that Diego and I stay really up to date on what's new and happening in the game of market gardening. So, Erich, I will take it over to you.
All right. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, I think kind of the format we're going to talk about, a handful of tools that have really, in the last 12 months, have really transformed our farm and brought it to kind of the next level of production and profitability. And so we'll kind of run through those, and then we can talk in depth or ask questions on those too. But you guessed it, yeah, the paper pot transplanter we've been using for a little over a year now, but it took some time to really incorporate it into our production system, and it has been incredible as far as the amount of transplanting we can do with a small crew now. It has really reduced the amount of time that we're spending transplanting and the amount of time we're bending over and kind of breaking our backs. And so it's been really, really awesome of a tool, to the point where there's basically, we pretty much only grow crops that we can transplant with the paper pot transplanter, with the exception of what we call kind of a long harvest crop or a fruiting crop. And that would be like tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, summer squash, kale, those kind of things that we're gonna, they have such a wide spacing, and it just doesn't justify that we can make the time investment to just do standard plugs for those.
Yeah, these are some of the crops that Erich does here too. Some fennel and then some scallions.
Yep. Yeah, we're cranking, and you brought up the organic certification too, and that became an issue for us this year. And this tool has been so instrumental in kind of giving us more time and increasing profits that we told our certifier when they were going to when it was no longer allowed, that we were going to drop our certification over it, because we'd much rather have this tool than that certification, because these are the kind of tools we need to make small scale farming profitable. And there's all these concessions for big ag, and it's time that they kind of change their outlook to help the small farmers as well.
Exactly. Hey, Erich, do you want to talk about this a little bit? This is something you're doing now at the paper pot.
Sure. We're doing it, and this really could apply to any transplanting of flats, but we do a root dip before we transplant with some amino acids and some kind of natural growth hormones that we get from a local amendment company called Ferticell. And this company's been really great in kind of helping us with our fertility program and that. And so this universal product just helps stimulate that root development in that. And so we do a heavy watering of the trays prior to transplanting, which is kind of counterintuitive. A lot of people think that they should be relatively dry when they start transplanting, but you want that weight in the cells so that it really drops into the furrow well and has that tension. So we water them real heavy, and then we do this root dip with, 1 part of this universal, 1 part water, and we just submerge the bottom half inch of the tray into a tub that allows it to absorb enough, and then we see a lot of benefits as far as that transplant taking off right away after we do that.
Mm-hmm. Is there what are like, so Eric, maybe just for a quick sec, just talk about, could you kind of like list some of the main crops you use the paper pot for on the farm? We saw fennel and scallion there. We all know Salanova. What are some of the things you're doing these days?
Yeah, tomorrow we actually have a big day of transplanting. We got a direct seeding today, and transplanting is tomorrow. But like you mentioned, Salanova. We also grow 3 types of mini head lettuce, in the Summer Crisp family, the Romaine family, and the Little Gem. So that's all paper pot. Fennel, scallions, kohlrabi. We do storage radishes in the paper chains. We do, what else? Bok choy. Probably missing a couple here. We do spinach in the kind of the shoulder seasons where it's tough to germinate. It's a little warm here, and so we can germinate that in our germination chamber, and then get consistent germination, and then transplant in the field. And yeah, that might be about it.
Yeah, because you guys are a lot more specialized now. I remember when you first got into this, you had, just like many growers, you have this really broad selection of crops, and then you've refined and refined and refined and kind of arrived where you are now. What is it? Is it 8 years now?
Yep, 8 years. Yeah, beets. I forgot that one, but that's like one of the main ones. That's such a saver.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's go on to your next one here. Using the Jang. This was a new thing for you this year too.
Yeah, correct. The Jang, modifying or the JP3 into the JP5 with the 5 hoppers, and we had been using the Johnny's 6-row for a number of years prior to that, and it got the job done, but it was super finicky. Soil conditions for us had to be just perfect. The tilth had to be just perfect. And so when we made this change, it was just night and day. We had a JP1, and so we were familiar with how well it singulated and how smooth it ran and that. And so, but going from the 6-row seeder from Johnny's to this was just so much easier. You could push it through the soil, or you can push it through the soil with less than ideal conditions, whether it's really dry, soft soil, chunky soil. It just kind of powers through. And these shoes are super important as part of that, because the standard JP3 comes with a really wide shoe, and so when you add 2 more to this JP3, there's not a whole lot of space between the shoes, and so they tend to get a lot of debris building up in them, whether it's chunky soil, rocks, sticks, all that. And so these really narrow shoes cut right through it and don't jam at all. You get the little closers on the back. So yeah, that's like equally as important as the seeder itself, because if you try to do the JP5 with the bigger shoes, it's kind of a pain.
When we were trialing this tool, that was just a nightmare. Putting the normal shoes on, you had to do all these modifications, because this whole idea came from I think it was originally Jeremy Mueller at Excelsior Farm, and then you started tinkering with it. And then I got one up here, and in all my trials with the original Jang shoes, which is if you buy this from Johnny's or anybody else for that matter, you don't get these shoes, and you can't special order these shoes. So you have to basically take the shoe that Johnny give you. You either modify it by clamping it down and then taking the back off, and it still doesn't even get to. It's still double the size of this. This shoe is like, I think it's a quarter of the width of that, or something, maybe a third. But then you got to take off the back part that closes the hole, so you don't get a perfect close over, and it's difficult doing it that way. This is just, it's all in one thing.
Yeah, and there is like the, Sutton Ag sells the kind of knockoff of the Jang, the clean cedar, and they offer a narrow shoe. But when I looked into that one, like it's still twice as wide as the shoe that you guys are offering on the website. So way, way better.
Yeah, totally. And so Eric, what are some of your prime, have you had any new discoveries? Like maybe just go through some of the lists of things that you're doing with this tool, like which ones are 6 rows? Because is that how you're doing it? It's all a 6 row or a 10 row now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I knocked out 18 beds this morning before lunch with this thing. So it makes short work of it, which is great. We're doing 10 rows for all of our baby greens, whether it's our mesclun mix, arugula, baby kale, mizuna, tatsoi. And then we occasionally plant, like we just a couple weeks ago planted just like baby lettuce, like a lettuce mix, because we had a gap in production with our Salanova, and so we only had a 30-day window, and so we planted direct seeded the lettuce with the Jang to kind of as our backup, and so we dropped that in. Do all of our carrots with the JP5. If we're doing baby carrots, we can do 10 rows. If we want a kind of a medium-sized carrot, we'd like to do just the 6 rows for the carrots. And then let's see here, radishes. We've done 6 rows, but we've actually switched back, and now we're just doing 10 rows.
10 rows.
10 rows. Wow. Yeah, I mean they don't take up much space, and we're doing 1-inch spacing as far as in row, and so there's plenty of room for them to grow. But that's the nice thing about this cedar is because we use it as a tool to manage demand. So our crop plan is set, before the season starts. But if, and we started the season doing 6 rows of radishes, and then we had more demand for them. So we were easily able just to fill those extra 2 hoppers and then convert without changing our crop plan, add 4 more rows of radishes in that same bed. And so it gives you that fluctuation. If radishes aren't selling, you can drop to 4 rows, and so it's very kind of versatile in that sense that you can kind of tweak, how many rows of that cedar you're using.
Mm-hmm. Do you find, Eric, that if you were to just drop down to 4 rows, say on radish, that you're going to get an extra, like a faster DTM because they're a little wider spaced? Does that make much of a difference down in Arizona?
I don't know with radishes because they're such a vigorous crop. I would say with carrots, we having that extra space is super helpful. But yeah, the turnips, the hawker eyes, we do a 6 row again because we don't want to crowd them and we want them to grow really quickly as well. So I would say that's that's a good way of thinking about it for most crops.
And what's been your how have you been cultivating in between those like a 10 row crop? Are you doing much in row cultivation there?
Primarily like a tine weeder, weeding rake works really well. But we're trying to do minimal tillage and take care of most of that weed pressure before the crop goes in. And so, we're flame weeding the carrots prior to them emerging. But otherwise, yeah, it's just, pulling that rake through, and then some, hand spot weeding here and there has been sufficient.
You're also on some fairly virgin soil too, so might be a little bit of time, and then the weed pressure might increase.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're anticipating. We've been pretty fortunate thus far with pretty minimal weed pressure, and but kind of that weeding strategy is super critical. With obviously direct seeding, you can't use things like landscape fabric, and then same thing with the paper pot transplanter. You're making a trade for the efficiencies of the transplanter, and so to have those good tools like those tine weeders, or some of these in-row kind of cultivators are really important.
Totally. Okay, so the next thing that was big for you at Steadfast was your irrigation.
Yeah, we wanted to do something different at this site, and understanding our context is unique or different than a lot of people's, and our growing conditions were in a pretty warm, dry climate, and so we wanted something that we could either do overhead or drip. We wanted to primarily rely on the drip because that's going to be the most efficient use of water, pinpointing exactly where we want all that water to go. But there's times where we want to be overhead, primarily when we're germinating direct seeded crops. There's no better way really than to be able to do lots of short cycles of irrigation and just keeping that top half inch of soil moist while things are germinating. And then also when we're transplanting, to be able to kind of minimize that transplant shock, and be able to we can turn on as we're transplanting if need be, so that things are cooling down and not overheating it, and not stressing too much, and it's kind of cooling that soil all around it, which is great. And actually there's a third reason, which we were using these last season just in the summer, that was for our little small kind of mini hoops for our greens production in the summer months and lettuce production, and being able to use those sprinklers to mist and coat the shade cloth and kind of create that microclimate, that evaporative cooling effect, which has been really helpful to allow us to grow lettuce in the warm months. So lots of good advantages, but I think somebody just commented on a post I made yesterday asking why would I invest in all that, put all that money into all that infrastructure of the both types of irrigation systems. And the reality is, wobblers are not that expensive, but they're nice because you don't have all that throwaway of the drip, and drip is also not terribly expensive. It's more of your main line and all your fittings that start to creep up in cost. And we were able to figure out a way to use a single header line and pressure regulators in that, and be able to run both systems on that same header. And so we can run both drip and overhead together. We can run just drip, or we can run just the overhead. And so, yeah, we use these valves. It's really simple, but it's the same 1-inch header splitting off, and we're running it at 15 PSI, which is about the max you want to do with the drip that we're using. And it's with the smaller nozzles, I think they're the gold nozzles, it's enough pressure to run those effectively. And so, yeah, it's been a really sweet system. So, today we did, I mentioned 18 beds with the Jang cedar, and we didn't have enough time to get all the drip lines on, so we just throw on the overhead because those are already in place, and we're able to start watering immediately without worrying about getting those drip on right away.
The next thing was how you kind of rearranged your post-harvest and updated some things in there.
Yep. Yeah. You know, one of the blessings, of moving as many times as we've moved the farm, which we've done 1, 2, 3. This is our 4th location in 8 years. We get to refine our systems, our processes, you know, our infrastructure each time. And so the wash station is, you know, one of those areas that can kind of make or break you, and having the right tools really makes a huge difference. And we're not talking fancy tools, we're just talking about having the right tools. And so this time around, we switched where in our previous setup, we had 2 medium-sized tubs for washing greens and 4 small tubs for washing roots. And, you know, and so we had kind of 2 areas for 2 different kind of genres of crops. And what we wanted to do this time is create 2 identical areas, but design them in a way that they can work for all crops and that. And so this is kind of what we came up with. So again, we're trying to use as much simple, like locally available materials, cost-effective materials. And so we've got these 170-gallon galvanized water troughs that we modified. We built a wooden stand for them, added drains to the bottom of them, and then we're able to mount individual bubbler, blower motors to those. And so we can use those tubs for spraying veggies, like roots, and just using a sprayer to clean things up. Or we can bubble those same roots, which we do often, or we can just use it for the greens production. And so each setup has the 170-gallon tank with the bubbler right there set up. And then we have a Hudson valve feeding into the tank, which is a unrestricted full flow filler with a stop valve on it. So you adjust where you want the height of your fill line to be, and you can turn this on and it fills super fast, but then you can walk away and it'll shut off on its own right at the right level that you are, need it to. And so that's huge, because I can't tell you how many times, somebody will be filling a sink, get distracted, go get something, and come back, and the sinks are overflowing, and just waiting when you're using just a hose and waiting for it to fill takes forever. And so this thing fills crazy fast. So that got rid of a bottleneck for us in that process by adding those fillers, Hudson valves there. And then on that same 1-inch line, we can talk about this. The bubblers themselves, again, they're just fittings pressed together, not glued, so we can take them apart and clean them really easily. But one of the things we've done, and a lot of people have made bubblers, and they're either sitting flat on the bottom of the basin, or they're wedging bricks or blocks of wood underneath them to give you a gap. And so we came up with kind of a simple solution, which is just using these corner 3-way 90s for our corners. And then we put a plug, like a cap, on the bottom that rests. And then we actually drilled a hole through that cap, because we wanted it to be mostly restricted, but we also wanted, when we drained the sinks, for all that water that was sitting in the bubbler line to be able to drain out. So all 4 corners have a drain at the low spot. Another bottleneck that we found was actually draining the sinks in between, and took forever to drain these 170-gallon tanks. And so we made the decision, let's drill another drain in there so we can double, the amount of water that we can evacuate from those sinks. So we did that. And at this site, we were kind of spoiled for the first time to have concrete floors and a floor drain. And instead of locking ourselves into sink placement and all that, we decided that we were just going to drain and have like a little 90 sweep out of the sinks and let it drain on the floor, run down and fill the trench drain from there, which has actually been really great because it actually filters out all the debris from the greens and whatnot, kind of collect on the concrete before it goes into the drain. So we have less issues with clogging pipes and that sort of thing. And so, so that's just a really simple thing. And then if we need to adjust or change the sinks, we're not locked into any specific location. Yeah. What else?
You got your drying screen here.
Yeah. I mean, simple tables. They pivot or hinge towards us, so we can grab that handle on the backside, and it tilts towards us, so you can, clean off those tables. Yeah, just like that. Kind of the next revision of that table will be like a gas assist shock on those, kind of like what's on your back, like tailgate of a SUV or something like that. That just is going to assist in lifting that, because depending on the person, it can be difficult to tilt those. And so at some point we'll add those. But yeah, simple table. All of our tables are very basic, just simple lumber, trying to maximize. We have as few cuts and as waste as possible. And overhead drying fans built into the rafters though, so they're kind of out of the way. So each table has 4 fans over it. So
yeah,
they dry nice and fast, but we're again in a drier climate, so worked well for us.
Another thing that I was super impressed by at your farm when I was down there is how you have integrated your walk-in cooler with the packing area by putting a secondary door in there. That was super cool. Where did that, how did that come about?
Sure. Do you have a picture of the front of the wash area?
Like that?
From outside, like a wider. So
no.
Okay. Well, no worries. So our wash area, these buildings are these modular sheds, basically 32 foot by 12 foot. And we have 2 doors kind of symmetrically placed off the ends. One goes into the walk-in cooler, one goes into, just to the left of the screen on the other side of the sinks into our pack room. And what ended up happening was all the produce comes out of the field, goes in this door, and then it would come back out to wash after it chilled. But then when we were packing, people were having to come out the other door from the pack room, cut through the wash area, grab bins, and go back and forth. And so it was really disruptive to the flow of the washing area. And it also took a lot of time for the person to kind of walk around each time. It's not very far, but it just all adds up. And so anyway, we just said, what if we cut a hole in the wall and threw a door in, and then we can just cut straight through. And again, the produce goes in and out of the cooler as few times. We can actually keep things colder because we could keep that door in that pack room to the outside closed. And it's so much faster. We did restaurant orders for about 12 customers today, and in and out of there, and it's just so much smoother and quicker to be able to grab stuff and that. And so it's been amazing actually. And I need to add the strip curtain. We have over all the doors going to the walk-in cooler. We have these strip curtains that just help keep that cooler air in there. And so I've got it. I just haven't installed it on there, and that's going to help with the insulation. And then we'll add a foam panel to the door itself, which once we hit the warmer months will be super helpful.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this was a big one here too on the farm. This is number 5. So we'll finish up this one, and then we'll take Q&A. I've been marking everybody's questions, so we'll do our best to get people's questions. Obviously, things like super chat get a priority, but we'll have time to answer questions here.
Yeah. The germination chamber. We really felt, especially because of our climate, and it's not so much, a lot of people build germination chambers to keep things warm. We needed to build one to keep it cool. And so we started with a large volume, like the biggest, upright freezer we could get. And we picked a freezer over a fridge just because the insulation is greater. And we took out all the shelving. We actually removed the shelving that was on the door itself. We had to cut it off and kind of seal up that panel. And so we just ended up with this large cavity. And then I just went to we just have a local fabricator that I have build me things here and there, and just gave them a drawing of kind of a rack system. And, I've seen other people like drill into the side of the cooler to the freezer or the refrigerator and mount it on there. And I didn't really want to do that. And so this is just a freestanding unit that just slides in and self-supports itself. And I can fit, I think it's 28 trays in there, which is still not enough. We have to kind of split our seating into 2 rounds and that, but that's just more about planning, but holds a ton. And, we design the shelves because we do certain crops in the like 50 cell, 1020s, like our tomatoes in 50 cell. And so we wanted to make sure that those would still clear because they sit taller than most trays and that. But so we can fit, it all fits in there really nicely. And then at the bottom, all we have in there is a fogger that you can get all over the place. And we just have a plastic bin filled with water, and it fogs and adds humidity to the room. Since then, because we had some colder nights, we added a small crock pot to actually, the water just heats up, and that's enough to heat the chamber as well. And so that's, now you'll see it's next to the fogger. And then 2 simple controllers for it that's just inline. Instead of plugging the freezer or this fogger directly into the wall, it has a kind of an inline interrupter, and we set our parameters of temperature, both hot and cold, and our humidity, and it kicks on the freezer or the crock pot depending on if it's too hot or too cold, and then kicks off. And same thing with the fogger. If the humidity gets low, then that will kick on. So super simple, but I mean, we're germinating lettuce in less than 48 hours now, consistently. Tomato, I mean, it's like fennel in like 3 days, where before you're talking like 7 to 10 days. And it's like such a critical tool to go along with the paper pot transplanter, because it's hard to build an overage into paper pot because it's a chain, right? And so then you have to go back and you lose some of those efficiencies if you have to fill gaps. And so you want to have as close to 100% germination as possible, and the germination chamber has really helped us get there.
Totally. So real quick, Eric, basic components of, and I had a number of people asking me this from the field, was basic components are, you had a Frigidaire freezer. Was it, what do you know if there's a particular brand, or is it just any old Frigidaire freezer?
Any old box will work. If you want it to cool, just make sure it's running. But yeah, it doesn't matter what you use. It's more about the size and the internal. And that one for us, because the paper pot trays are larger, we had to make sure, and we actually bought that new, which a lot of people are just finding and buying stuff used, which is fine and great. But we had very specific needs, and so the paper pot trays being a little bit bigger, and we wanted to go side by side, so we made sure we got one that would work for it.
Right. And then the fogger, I guess people can just Google that, find a fogger.
Yep.
Probably not hard to find, right? Had a plastic bin in there. That's all you really had. Now, for people in warmer climates, you were suggesting, in colder climates, you want to keep it warm, you can just use a crock pot.
Yep. Yeah. And the same controller for the temp, for the cool, also has a plug-in for the heat. So one controller will run both the hot and the cold. And so the crock pot just heats up the water. And, that actually creates humidity as well. So you could probably get by without even the fogger if you're in a cooler climate, because it's going to kick on enough to create your humidity. But if you're worried about it burning off, I know people that use oil, they just pour oil in there too, and then it doesn't evaporate in the crock pots. So it doesn't get hot enough to be a problem.
Oh, wow. I did, I just realized I didn't put I thought Diego took a photo of it. Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen for a second. Is this the thing that, I'm just going to share this. Is this the thing you're talking about here?
Yep.
Okay, so that's it. So that's the thing that controls the temp. So you just buy one of these and you hook that up. So you hook this up to the crock pot essentially, right? Because that puts just the amount of energy in to get the right type of temperature. Is that how it works?
At the bottom of the picture, it looks like a little power strip, and there's a couple plugs. And so you instead of plugging the freezer into the wall, you plug it into this, and then this has its own plug. And so it basically turns on and off the power to the freezer or whatever we're trying to control as needed. Right. So it's super simple. It's as basic as it gets. So the one on the left controls the humidity, and I think it has a cooling function, like one temp setting. And then the one on the right has both heating and cooling, which is why, it has the two plugs. But I think you can get them on Amazon for maybe $30 each. So really inexpensive. I know, Ray Tyler is using them too. And it's been super. They're becoming more and more popular. Instead of buying these commercial crazy priced units, it's just about figuring out, like, what are we trying to accomplish and finding simple solutions for it. So
right. Okay, that's great. So we'll do 5 to 10 minutes on Q&A, and then we can all go to dinner. Cool. So I have saved some. So what I want to get to right away, Eric, this is Jason Brown is asking us, can we buy the parts list for the irrigation system? I think we can just tell you what they are for free, Jason. Eric, do you want to just kind of go through what are the main components? Like, you've got a wobbler line, right?
Yep.
Kind of go through these.
We're doing wobblers every 3 or 4, in between every 3 or 4 beds. It depends on your block size and that, but we don't have to go crazy overlapping coverage because it's one of 2 methods of watering. And so, so just on a 14 bed block, we have 8 wobblers. And that's all being fed by a 1-inch, it's oval hose is the material or the brand of the header, and it comes in all different sizes, but we have 1-inch, and you do have to make sure you size that properly. We have underground 2-inch hard PVC feeding to each field block, and so it's all 2-inch until it goes up to those 14 rows. But if you're doing lots and lots of rows, you might need a 2-inch line or an 1.5-inch line to be able to have enough volume to supply that. And then it's just basic fittings, ball valves, and just the barb type fittings for the drip valves. And we get it all from rain flow irrigation. out of Pennsylvania. They're really affordable and have a lot of great available parts, and Dubois and all that I think has a lot of the same parts. This is just a little bit easier for where we're located.
Yeah, that's right, in Canada. And I guess Jason, to further your question, you could go back in this video once it's posted, which is as soon as we're finished, and you could look at those screenshots. You could take a screenshot on your computer and then just go to your local irrigation supply store and say, hey, can you get me this and this and this fitting? And from the images I showed, you should be able to deduct, what he's using per bed and all that, because, we showed all the parts actually. And I showed even the manifold you have between when you have water that comes up for each of your blocks. I showed that as well. So it's all there. So you should be able to put it together.
Yeah, the solenoid valves and the pressure regulators, and it's all really simple stuff and not very expensive.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to ask one real quick question, then I'm going to let Diego ask some questions on behalf of the people in here. This question came from somebody actually in the Zoom chat, so I just want to get to some of those. This one here from Sean McCracken asking, could you provide the names of the vendors so this is for Eric, could you provide the name of the vendors you use for your packaging, specifically the unwaxed cardboard box, the poly liner, and the moisture control sheets?
Yeah, the boxes, boxes are a tricky one because it's either buying generic boxes or typically spending crazy money on with like all the big produce box manufacturers like International Paper. They want you to buy thousands and thousands and die cut plates and all that. So for boxes, we actually found a local box company called Advanced Packaging, but they're local. I don't know that they do a whole lot of shipping outside of our area and that. And so we designed our own box from other boxes that we liked in that. And so we own the plate for making the boxes. So it was a initial investment. I think we spent like $1,000 on just the plate itself, but then we own it forever and it kind of lasts forever. So that's the box. The moisture papers, Vegetable Growers Supply, VGS. I think they're mostly out of California and Southern Arizona. There's a location, and so the closest one is 4 hours from me, so we just have them shipped to us, but pretty affordable. You'll pay more for the shipping than the product. What else was it? The bags, the liners?
The liner, poly liner. Yeah.
Again, another local company called Arizona Bag Company that we use, and so we try to create as many like local relationships for us because it's easier when you need something, and it's just better for everybody to keep the money close by and that. So we work hard for these companies to bring in, if they don't have them, bring in the products that we need and develop what we're looking for.
He followed up and said, have you ever thought of selling the boxes? I imagine that probably something you wouldn't want to bother doing.
I've thought about it. Yeah, I mean, we could do something. We'll put them on the paperputt.co website. So
there you go. Hey, there you go. Maybe we got a new product there. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know how worth it would be to do that for us. We'd look at it, but hey, you know what? Maybe it's something we could look at.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, totally. Diego, you got some banked up questions there?
Yeah, one that came in a while back. It's directed towards Eric. Eric, can you kind of talk about your process for cropping out the paper chains when you're done with a crop? What do you do with the chains? Do you green waste them? Do you chuck them? Do you put them through the compost pile? I know when we visited the farm in December, you were talking about potentially looking at something to shred the old chains and then compost them that way. And I actually looked into trying to find a shredder that would handle the paper chains. I couldn't find anything. So what's your current process right now for a crop is done? What do you do with the crop residue and the paper chains in the field?
Yeah. You can, if you're using a rototiller, you could actually just rototill them in if you're not going to need to plant for a while. But for the most part, that's not usually an option, and because you're going to have shreds of paper all over the place and just doesn't make sense. But so what we do is when we're done like cropping out, like let's say some beds of Salanova, we run a wheel hoe with like the TerraTech wheel hoe with the horizontal blade, and we undercut all the chains just to loosen up from underneath, and then we follow behind and we collect them all into like milk crates. And so there's some of like the root mass as well as the paper that is coming up with it. And from there, yeah, Diego, we talked about, I was trying to find something that I could then just feed those through a shredder and break down to really small pieces so that the composting would happen a lot faster, which we haven't figured that out yet. But I partnered up with another local farm that does a lot of like kind of food waste rescue and has a big composting operation. And so he basically drops off barrels, and so we fill those barrels with all the residue, and then he composts it and makes nice compost, and then he brings us compost every quarter or so as kind of payment for all the materials we're providing them with. So because of our location and our farm size, we just don't have a ton of room to deal with that. And so as much as I'd like to compost it myself, we haven't really figured out an efficient way of doing that yet.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of shredding them. And if somebody out there has a good idea for a shredder that would handle those chains, email us, suggest it. I looked around like some of the ones Harbor Freight sells and stuff like that. I couldn't find anything economical and small that was going to make sense. One other question that came up regarding paper pot was chain sizes. Your farm, for the crops you grow, what is the main paper chain spacing that you use? And do you try and standardize it and just do most of the crops in one size?
We do, yeah, primarily we're using the 6-inch chain. That's covering the majority of what we're doing. The only exception is beets, and we do some storage radishes like watermelon radishes and purple daikon and things like that. We use the 4-inch chains for those. So those are the two we're using, but I would say 75 to 80% is all 6-inch. We do keep a case of 2-inch chains on hand because every once in a while, like I mentioned, like the spinach, every once in a while we'll transplant the spinach from the chains, and so we want that to be 2-inch. And occasionally, if the pest pressure is really heavy, we have a certain insect called a Bagrata beetle that just will decimate certain brassica crops, and so we have a hard time if that pressure is heavy with like hawker-eye turnips, getting them to get established after direct seeding. And so our solution to that is transplanting hawker-eyes in the 2-inch chains, after they're already, a little bit more mature, and that gives them enough to kind of survive against those pests and that. So that gives us that edge. So, but those are kind of not all the time. Yeah.
One thing I see, a lot of people are concerned about chlorine in the water. And honestly, this is something that somebody mentions almost every time I talk about urban farming in a webinar. Erich, what do you have to say about that as a concern?
I'd say I don't think anybody wants chlorine in their water, but it's kind of a reality of living in any sort of municipality. It's in all the potable drinking water, whether we like it or not. And so, it's not ideal, but I'm not overly concerned about it. You know, we make some compost teas and we'll off gas that water before we use it to let the chlorine burn off and that sort of thing. But, you know, as far as growing, you know, it is what it is, I guess. You know, it's kind of the world we live in, I suppose. And, you know, as far as washing veggies in it, you know, tons of people are using Sanidate in their water, which is basically a chlorine product anyways. And so, I mean, you know, I don't know. What's the difference?
I said to a number of people in the comments, I said, just show me the studies you're talking about, because everything I've looked at shows that chlorine evaporates when it's irrigated really quickly. And I haven't seen any significant evidence to show that it is harmful to soil biology or health. Not to say that it couldn't be, but I just don't see the evidence. And people, I find with these things, it's an excuse to not take action. People look for little things and go, yeah, well, what about this? I could do it if I could only do this. Or, you know, if I can't have it perfectly, I won't do it. It's like, you know, we don't live in a perfect world.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, I mean, what's the solution? Like, you can't grow food in the city, you know, and then, okay, so we're going to only grow food in rural areas. Well, I'm from Minnesota, and it's very rural and farm country, and all I hear about is contaminated water from, you know, from different things and that. And so, you know,
slurries,
I suppose.
Exactly. I would way rather deal with a little bit of chlorine in water than deal with some of that agricultural runoff. So we don't have much time, but one question from Dawson here is there a reason why everything in the pack house is painted white? I imagine there is, Eric?
No, there's no real reason. Just that's the color we picked. And so, you know, we are in an urban environment in a community, and so there's a level of aesthetics, but we were painting things white prior to that. And I don't know, I guess we could have picked any color. It's just good to paint wood. So.
It looks nice. White paint's cheap. Dawson also says he'd totally buy those boxes. So maybe we got a product there, Eric. I don't know. Maybe we should talk about that, because you know what? The more I think about it too, I mean, it is a pain point for some people to find the right kind of box to pack in. And you've got sort of a kit on how you do it. Maybe there's something there. Okay. I mean, there are more questions, but I mean, all of us have to get to dinner and stuff. So we'll save them for another time. But what I will say is, for those of you who aren't aware, Eric and I are doing a workshop at Steadfast February 25th. And this is going to be the first workshop on his farm. And it is such an incredible space for having a workshop. Not only is it an awesome farm, and they're doing everything that, you know, if you want to get into market gardening, really no matter where you live in the US, you're going to get a ton of value out of this workshop. A lot of people think that things are so dependent on the climate. It's like, oh, well, I live in Indiana. What am I going to get out of a workshop in Arizona? It's like everything. And you get a chance to escape some of the winter. But, you know, in North America, no matter what corner you're in, there are similarities to how we grow pretty much everywhere in North America. So you're going to get a ton out of it.
We're growing the same way. We're growing the same way, just maybe in different times of year. So, yeah, a lot of it's the exact same. Yeah.
I will paste, if anybody wants to come to this workshop, there's still some tickets available. Go to the urbanfarmer.co/PMG. That's to get to the whole workshop where there's other tickets. But I will later on, right after this video finishes, I'll make sure to paste the link. And if you go to any of my previous videos over the last couple of weeks, the link to the workshop is in there too. So it's easy to find. We'd love to see some of you guys down there. We had a killer time last year, but this time will even be more fun because we've got a restaurant right there. We got a playground for people's kids. We got a park we can hang out in. And we've got that space to have the classroom sessions in right there too, Eric.
Yep. It's all reserved.
So it's all there. It's awesome. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks, Erich, for joining us,
Sure.
And Diego. And yeah, please like the video, guys. Share it if you want. You want to share it with your friends, get more people to see it. There's some pretty good, valuable information in this one. And we'll see you again. Okay.